Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Outspoken Samantha. I appreciate you being here. Please hit the thumbs up on the video and subscribe while you are here. YouTube is absolutely throttling my channel right now. So if you found this video, please subscribe and let YouTube know that their censorship sucks. Anyway, so we're going to talk about yet another protest that the left got together for over the weekend, because apparently that's all these people know how to do, is create more movements and protests and make themselves look more and more unhinged, because clearly it's working for them. So on April 5th, which was just this past Saturday, the latest protest was called the Hands Off protest, which no, it was not a pride parade, but that would be the hands on route. Anyway, and this one swept across the nation like a bad case of the flu. So there were thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people that took to the streets to scream about Trump and Elon Musk and apparently anything else that they could pin on us, the big bad conservatives. So you can see that this was taking place in all of our major cities: Boston, New York, Chicago, Portland, San Francisco, San Diego, even in Idaho. Idaho, what are you guys doing? Utah, we've got to talk. And Oakland. I mean, most of those cities are not very surprising. And I did see some people post and say, you know, what good could have been done had these people gotten together to, you know, pick up trash off of the streets or just help clean up the area or maybe help the homeless people. No, they just had to get together and just create more chaos. So you might be wondering, what exactly was the point of this hands-off circus? Because if it was enough to reach national levels, there must have been something extremely pressing for this many people to get together for. But as usual, the purpose of why the left does what they do, it's a difficult question to answer because no one really seems to know. Now, there were things put out there as the reason for this national hissy fit, which made it sound legit. This particular post was circulating. It says on April 5th, 2025, over 1,200 protests took place across all 50 states in the United States, organized under the Hands Off movement. These protests were primarily against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, with significant demonstrations occurring in cities such as Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Boston, and Providence. The protests were a response to various political actions and policies, with participants expressing opposition to the administration's approach to social programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. You mean like kicking people off of these programs who have been dead for a couple hundred years? Okay. And when I first heard that this event was being organized, because I've been hearing about it for a couple of weeks at this point, those were the reasons that I heard, that it was against Trump supposedly cutting Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, which is completely untrue, but that's irrelevant to the left. So they were mad about that. But there were other people that were out there posting videos like this gal that just had a completely different message.
Be at the protests April 5th in DC and nationwide to tell Trump and Musk, hands off. But let's also be honest. It is righteous, but it's not enough to protest for one day. It is righteous, but it is not enough to say hands off. The Trump fascist regime must be driven from power. That's why I'm calling on you to join the Refuse Fascism contingents at these protests to raise and spread the demand the Trump fascist regime must go. Because if this regime is allowed to stay in power, if the decent people of this country fall into waiting for the next election cycle, Trump and his MAGA fascists will continue to shatter the rule of law.
Yes, those 300-year-old ancestors of ours who've been receiving Social Security checks are going to be devastated if Trump and Elon continue doing what they're doing. Listen, I have no problem with people protesting whatever it is that they want to speak out against. However, what seems to be a consistent issue with whatever these activists are doing is that they never point to an example of the thing that they claim to be protesting. Like, if you're claiming that Trump is a fascist, okay, define what you mean by fascist, and then give me an example of what he's done that meets your definition. Has he censored the opposing political party? Because that would be a fascist. And we know who has done that. Has he used violence and intimidation to force people to comply in order to earn their freedom? Like burning Teslas or firebombing pregnancy help centers or sending SWAT teams to conservative influencers to send the message that they'll be safe if they just stay silent or go along with the leftist agenda, because that would fit the definition of a fascist. So I have plenty of examples. Do you? Of course she doesn't. She's just using fear tactics while not defining her terms or giving examples, which is typical. So as I said, when I first heard about the organization of this nationwide event, I did hear that people were trying to protest some of the actions and policies of this administration. So again, we're looking for definitions and clarity on what specific things they have done that these people are against. So let's see if we can get an answer there.
Of Trump's policies, or what people is surrounded by that made you most concerned about, that you said, whoa, that's really not okay? There might be a lot for you, I know.
Yeah.
What brought you out today?
I'm not a good, I can't.
What's your biggest concern with public schools right now?
That they want to dismantle them, and then they're trying to change history and change the history books.
Have they done that yet, or is that something that they're planning to do?
They have curriculum already figured out. It's all in the Project 2025.
Well, it's in the Project 2025, but what in the law right now have they done? What first steps have they made that concern you the most?
They're just, I don't know how far they've gotten on it. I can't answer that. But
Concerned about Project 2025 and plans that they might have to be doing stuff like that.
yeah, but some of it's already happening. I didn't research.
What are the biggest steps he's taken that you saw that you're like, oh, I'm not okay with that in terms of freedom of speech?
I'm not okay with the message of Fox News.
If you read her sign, it says freedom of speech, no scripted faux news. She's advocating for censorship that she thinks Trump is doing. So if you haven't caught on already, they're out there screaming and yelling about Trump because that's what they've been told to do. They don't have an answer. And clearly, having a purpose for protesting doesn't really mean anything to them. And basically, they're just confirming that when their party leaders, the ones that they worship, and tell them to be angry, they will be angry. And when the party leaders they have unquestioning allegiance to tells them to target the people who are exposing them, they'll do it, and they don't need to know why. They have been told to be angry at Elon and Trump for cutting waste from government because it has been rebranded by their party leaders as Elon having a position he didn't earn, which isn't true, over an agency that didn't exist, which isn't true, and profiting off of the wasteful and corrupt spending that he's exposing, which again is not true. None of this is true, but these people do not care about the truth. They care about being angry. But you know how we also know that they have no real dedication to this cause and they're just out there protesting for the sake of protesting? Because they have to bust out handouts to read the reasons that they have been given for showing up.
Fascist Trump regime must go.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious what makes him a fascist. You pointed out that maybe something about his relationship with the media, he wants to control it, but
yeah.
How again, you're calling him a fascist.
Yeah, well,
what makes him a fascist?
One of the core tenets of fascism is creating an enemy, right? And blaming those problems on
What's
the
that?
enemy.
So paper gave me, yeah.
Who gave you that?
The people that gave me the sign. It's a free sign.
Oh, someone gave you the sign, and then they gave you the handout.
No.
So are you reading it now to try to answer the question?
Yeah.
So the guy was given a free sign and a handout of what to say. So someone was basically like, here, this is what you think about this cause, which is absolutely baffling to me because I have been to protests before, but I made sure that what they were protesting or rallying for was something that I actually believed in. I would never show up to a demonstration of any kind if I didn't know for sure that that thing aligned with who I am as a person and what I believe in and something that I actually want to see change in. Like, I have to have very specific terms. I don't want to be aligned with something that I don't understand, that I don't have examples of, that I can't define, because I don't want to come back later and look at that demonstration or that activity and find out that I stood with something that I didn't understand, and then come to find out it's something truly awful or evil or destructive. So it baffles me that it doesn't bother these people that they don't know what they're doing. They're just willing to show up and hold a sign that says anything, and it doesn't matter if it aligns with who they are as a person. But moving on, so not only were they being given signs and talking points, but they were also being paid to be there. So this gal gave us like a 5.5 minute video, a whole rundown of how she was actually paid to be there. And she starts out by saying that she was instructed not to wear anything that could be associated with MAGA. So no red and probably no American flags. She also said that she was told to find a gal with blue hair and a nose ring, which she thought would be very difficult to do because she just assumed that this was a liberal protest, and that's pretty much how all of them look. But she did find the person that she was supposed to connect with. And then she was told that she would be paid extra if she brought her own sign, which she did. There was a place to check in, and there were people that were instructing people and telling them what they had to do while they were there. So she made her own sign. I believe, from what I can tell from what she's saying, it sounds like she's not actually a liberal, but she showed up to the protest maybe just to make money and maybe just to see what it was about. So she wrote on her sign that everybody deserves a good education, which she was like, I have different mixed feelings about, but I thought it would be a good enough message to put on this sign and not draw attention to myself and maybe fit in. And then at the end of it, in order to get paid, she had to answer questions on a questionnaire. And those answers had to be very, very specifically aligned with the liberal agenda in order to prove that she had allegiance to them. And there were right and wrong answers. So that's the wildest part to me, aside from getting paid to be there. But let's hear what she had to say about that.
So anyways, I went on the march, and then at the end I had to check back in, and that's when they gave me the questionnaire. And okay, the interesting thing is, like, you had to answer the questionnaire as if you were a liberal, and there were right and wrong answers. Like, it wasn't just like whatever you thought. Like, you could get the questions wrong and you had to get them right in order to get paid. At this point, I had already invested like 2 hours of my time, so I wanted the money, you know? So the first question, for example, was why do Republicans want more women to stay home and not work and not have jobs? And again, I just kind of like had to put myself in like their mindset. So I wrote basically like, if women don't have jobs or job experiences and they have to rely on men financially, and that gives men a lot more control over their lives. For example, like, you know, if like she's in an abusive situation or whatever, she can't really leave, especially if she has kids. She doesn't really have the means to take care of them, and she doesn't have the experience to get a job that could like afford to take care of them. So it just gives like the men a lot more control to kind of do what they want her to do, basically.
Sounds like a safe answer. Pretty much anything that demonizes men or speaks against the patriarchy sounds like a liberal mindset. So she did a good job there.
But there were some that I just like didn't really know what they would consider a right answer, you know? So I just asked, I was like, what do I do if I don't know how to answer this? And she said, just like do your best and then come talk to her at the end. So for example, there's one I didn't really know what to say. It was like, what is critical race theory, and why should it be taught, and like what's an example of like something that you could learn from it? And I like didn't know what they wanted the answer to be, you know? So I just asked her about that one, and the answer that she gave is basically they just want people to understand the lasting effects and impact of segregation and discrimination. And the example she gave, what she called it? She called it like generational wealth. And she explained that during slavery and during Jim Crow, and like even after that in some places, like Black families have been essentially barred from owning homes, where like white families could own a home and then like pass that down, and their family can either like live in that home and not have to pay for a mortgage, or they could sell that and then use that money towards like other opportunities. But because Black families weren't able to own homes, they weren't able to like accumulate that wealth in the same way, and they had to like spend more of their income on rent, and they weren't getting that back the way you get back, you know, when you buy a house. So she said that was just like one example, but yeah, that was like kind of her answer to that question. So I wrote that down. And yeah, I got paid. I got paid $100 for going to the protest. and then I got paid an extra $10 for bringing the sign.
But this just shows how much these people are not about actual diversity. You have to answer the way that they want you to answer. You have to think like them. You have to speak like them. And they don't actually care if you believe it. They'll give you an incentive for saying it and marching along to it. And they'll also attack you if you don't go along with the things that they want you to go along with. So it's a very dictatorship mindset, guys. And it makes you wonder how many of the people across all of these states were there because they really align with the left versus how many showed up just to earn money. And just to call into question the authenticity of this event even more, there were clips of busloads of people climbing off. Everyone had the same signs and given the messages that they were supposed to display. And of course, lots of people wearing masks. Now, we know that that is not about protecting themselves from illness. It's because they're too embarrassed by their own nonsense to want to risk being recognized in this crowd of lunatics. Anyway, if it wasn't obvious already, these people are completely unhinged. And I know I've mentioned this in a few other videos, but if you want to know the reason that the leftists today are even worse than they were a few years ago, it's because everyone with a speck of sanity has left the left. Anyone with a conscience and any kind of moral line in the sand has left the Democrat Party. So all that is left now are the ones that are too far gone with Trump derangement syndrome to even be reasoned with at this point. They don't care about facts or truth or science or reality. They're just full of anger and fear and will act out of anger and fear in any way for any reason. They have no boundaries or limits about what they do, what they will do to act on behalf of the extremists leading their party, and they don't question anything that they're told. Anybody with the ability to question the narrative voted for Trump. So all that is left on the left are the ones who aren't capable of thinking or reasoning. It's just pure emotion and hatred. Which is why there is almost a new movement every week, a new activist protest, a new call to action of some kind. But it's also why nobody has a consistent answer about what they're doing, because it really is just driven by emotion. And it's also why this isn't going to be the last thing that they do. I have a feeling that this is just going to be nonstop for the next few years. But what I hope and pray is that people that have found their common sense and have left the extremist left, that they stay dedicated to the country. It's not about being dedicated to Trump or MAGA, but that they keep their vision clear and pointed in the right direction, and to not fall for this propaganda. Because if you need an example as to what happens to your brain when you start to fall for things that are completely untrue, you just have to look at this crowd, and hopefully it will keep you anchored and motivate you to stay anchored in reality, in truth, because you don't want to end up like this. But I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Again, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I am trying to grow this channel. Other than that, keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.